Welcome back, everybody, to the Omni stage at Event Tech Live, USA Canada 2021, and to our next session, how user-generated content changes the virtual event game. Make sure that you use the Glisser Q&A chat function underneath the video to post your questions for our next guest at Event Tech Live, CEO and founder at MeetingPlay, Joe Schwinger. Joe, thanks for joining Event Tech Live.
Yeah, my absolute pleasure.
I'm going to hand straight over to you, Joe. I know you've got a great session for our audience today. I'll see you back a little bit later on with some questions.
Great, thank you. So today I want to talk a little bit about some exciting changes that are going on in virtual events. Specifically, I would say here at MeetingPlay, some of the advancements that we're making to keep engagement up at virtual events. I think all of us in the event tech industry, as well as all the meeting planners, know now we are 14 to 16 months into this virtual world post COVID at this point. And we're seeing definitely that we have to really think differently about the content that we bring to the table, and more importantly about the new norms and how we take advantage of that. So today I want to talk a little bit about how you can flip the script a little bit. And I almost equate this to, a couple years ago with the TED format, right? We went from long keynotes to 90-minute breakouts to more short, concentrated data. And I almost equate that moment, that TED moment, and how we started to move things in that direction to where we are today. And we have to totally think differently now that we have this fatigue issue going on about bringing life into the equation. So let's talk first a little bit about, what exactly is user-generated content, right? And I think everybody obviously knows what this is, but I want to add a little bit of a different spin on this. We'll talk about social walls and social media, but user-generated content can actually extend itself into different areas of your virtual platform. Connecting attendees and allowing them to generate content, a part of networking and so on, certainly one of them. My personal favorite, though, is creative storytelling, which is on the backbone of authentic content. One of the biggest components that we're seeing in this new virtual environment is MeetingPlay works at we work on much larger conferences, right, where this is actually a fairly big issue. But what we're seeing is when you bring authentic content from users, which I'm going to talk about, is you really push the needle in terms of satisfaction of that actual content. I think that this is actually key in a hybrid environment as well, and I'll talk a little bit about tactics involved to do so there as well. So let's dive in, and look at some examples. I will say, though, that this is another, in my opinion, this is an area of opportunity for everybody that's watching. Just like 14 months ago when COVID hit, we were faced with changes that had to be made to adapt to adapt our events. This is really just another tool in your toolbox and another challenge on how you can push the envelope to make your virtual and your hybrid environments more engaging. Virtual technology is continuing to change the game. I've been talking for the last 14 months with our customers about, really, I believe the event industry has had their Uber moment, right? We never thought we would jump into a stranger's car, and now we do so all of the time and don't even think twice about it. Just like in the hybrid environment, we will have, in my opinion, 3 categories of events from now on. Virtual only, most likely at the top end of the funnel. Hybrid environments, working across all of them. And then we're only going to have in-person events too, and that's great, right? And those will be probably lower down the funnel. But really, all of us should be looking at this as a huge opportunity on how technology has completely changed the game for events. And again, I personally believe that this is a good thing, not a bad thing. It's just another toolbox in the arsenal of event planners and companies to be more sticky with folks. So let's dive in and let's talk about some of the tools that are coming out that you should be thinking about as you think about user-generated content. And I'm going to use a case study here from a very good customer that is always, like most tech companies, wants to be on the forefront of event tech and what's going on. And certainly they also wanted to be on the forefront of content relevant, stickiness, and increasing attendee satisfaction around that content. One of the big issues that Databricks faces is that they have a virtual environment with 300 plus sessions, right? And as you think about users and how they wish to digest content, that's a all-you-can-eat buffet, right? And sometimes you really need to narrow it down to what works best for that particular individual. Let me give you some examples. A big company like this services multiple product lines across multiple industries, government, media. Well, how do you provide tools to really hit the goals of the virtual attendee or the hybrid attendee to increase that that satisfaction? So how do we do that? And let me introduce you to a couple of key components here. The first is creating hubs of areas where we get people talking to each other. I think one of the best components of the virtual environments is we have successfully been able to bring face-to-face interactions in a virtual environment to the forefront. Essentially all of us really have cracked the nut on how we get people talking. What you're seeing here, though, is a combination of bringing subject matter experts. This is the user-generated content, right? And mirroring it with these virtual environments. So what you're seeing here on the left-hand side is dedicated rooms by experts. And it's not just employees of the company, it's influencers around this content. And you're creating an environment where they go to get their questions answered. This was also created in an environment where there was lots of ancillary content that was being run through our algorithm to provide relevant content. And what I mean by that is, using the reg data and using the networking algorithm, we know if you're working in the financial industry. So we take the 300 sessions and we boil that down to really relevant sessions for you, and also match you with experts to get those conversations started as well. And then what you're seeing here on the right-hand side, I think I go into it in a second, is a combination of our studio in the cloud that has been given to influencers and individuals to bring a face to that conference. And this is really where the user-generated content shined. As the event was going on, prior to the event, the studio allowed these individuals a platform to address other attendees, to talk about things that were important to them, to highlight things that were going on in the actual virtual platform. So here, what you're seeing on screen, let me see if this is actually going to play. No. So what you're seeing here is we gave Scott this outlet as a user and influencer to address everybody with a welcome message. And again, we extended this to a large portion of these influencers and the company. Not only was it done by video, but it was done by live chat. Again, what you're doing is you're taking really kind of, I would say, a, plain Jane 300 breakout session component and really adding a face to it, right? And that's one of the components that we've been hearing for the last 14 months. How do we bring more authenticity? How do we bring more of that face-to-face interaction? Well, giving your attendees, giving influencers, and giving the company an outlet like this brings that authentic information or that authentic touch to the forefront for your users. So this was, very successful if you ask me. And it ranged from just, hey, welcome to the conference. Make sure you check out all these things that are going on, to really detailed information about some topics that might be relevant to folks. And again, all of this was being run through algorithms to bring the proper content to the proper people. So let's move on here. This is another example of, really where user-generated content on steroids can produce an uplifting environment. So this was the Databricks Experience portal that put together, again, a lot of custom content recommendations. And really what it brought to the table was curated picks and playlists. And playlists I'll talk about in just a moment. But this is one of the really exciting components around user-generated content that I think is going to take off for our customers, but certainly for the hybrid environments. What you see here in the center, on the left-hand side, this was highly targeted content that was relevant to that user. Okay, so again, this is what you're seeing right here are picks for industry components of manufacturing and media. Those are things that the system knows about me from reg data. But on the right-hand side, this is the component that I think is really exciting. And that is the playlist builder that we have built for our customers that want a finer level of detail. Certainly you have an agenda, and you can filter that agenda by tags and by tracks. But remember what I said in the beginning of the conversation, we're looking to bring more authentic, more user-generated interaction. So playlists are actually generated by users. Okay, let me go back, sorry about that. Playlists are actually created by other users. Think about this as Spotify, right? So Spotify's rise in popularity was really social sharing of interest around music. I was an early Spotify adapter myself, and I would create a playlist of 5 songs. I would connect that to Facebook. And now my interest in music was being shared with my friends, which then brought them in to Spotify to create their own experience. Well, playlists by topics are essentially a play off of Spotify in the virtual and hybrid environment. So again, we gave this functionality to influencers in the data AI environment and users at the company. And by looking at the agenda content, the user-generated content, all of the components, all of the content, they put together a perfect curated list by a topic. So, for an influencer that hundreds of people follow, they put together their top picks of the overall environment and shared that on Facebook, which then brought more, or LinkedIn, I should say, and brought more people in because they're followed by thousands of people. I wouldn't say it was really all about getting more people into the virtual environment. It was more about allowing subject matter experts, your peers, people that you trust, right, to have that function to put together the perfect playlist. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying in the beginning. It's one thing if the event organizer puts together 4 topics, but somebody that I know in the industry that is well respected, right? I will take extra interest in, well, what do they think if I'm only going to spend 2 hours today in the virtual environment, let me go and see what X user put together as where I should spend my time. And really, I think that this is just the beginning of where this is going. And obviously we're very excited about the results that we've been seeing, but this is a play off of what we talked about MeetingPlay about 6 months ago in our hybrid environment, where we are going to have folks on property that really become those influencers that are going to sessions, right? That are live chatting, that are going to sponsors, and our users in the virtual platform, a MeetingPlay, will be able to follow them. This curated picks, the hallway chatter that I showed you, where people can just go live in a moment and start presenting to people, the playlist topics, all of that is the foundation of what will be, in my opinion, the next generation of where this event technology is going. Super exciting. What was exciting for MeetingPlay was seeing the folks that were willing to lend their time to build out all of this technology, to use this technology, but then also the people who would follow in different industries. So we're going to open it up for questions here. But what I want to leave you with before we go into the QA is, think about these, again, like we tell everybody, as just tools in your arsenal. And, everybody's doing algorithms around content, but how do you put steroids on it, but make it really relevant? And that is where the user-generated or the authenticity of users that can build this content really comes into play. Couple that with some of the short-term content that can be created by other users, and you really have, a virtual environment on steroids and something new that you can bring to your clients and something new for the industry, as a matter of fact. So I'm going to stop there and allow for us to really dive into some questions, if there are any, and let's turn over to questions.
Joe, it's James here again. Thanks very much for that session. Thanks very much for the timing of it as well, because you've given some great content there, some great insight, but you've left plenty of time to get through some questions here. So we don't have to keep the answers too short either, which is always great. Let's turn to Glisser in the event platform and have a little look at some of these. So where does it go from here? What other tools are on the horizon for user-generated content?
I think what you're seeing already, but what you will see a little bit more of as these platforms become more robust and add more tools for the actual capture of that content to mix it together with the social walls, you're going to see all of these things start to play almost like YouTube environments, in my opinion. When you provide tools to users that are passionate about topics, and let's step back, right? People go to events to invest their time because they are passionate about those topics. Really, as these tools become more prevalent and more sophisticated, I believe you're going to see these virtual environments move almost in the YouTube environment, where it's so easy, and I hate to use this word, but I guess I'm going to use it, right? Like YouTube and TikTok, right? And certainly I believe that TikTok has, certainly helped move the needle in the pandemic for people to being more used to creating this kind of content. But absolutely, I feel that it's up to event technology folks like MeetingPlay to think outside of the box and not just think about a studio where presenters and speakers can go live, but how do we extend those tools to the audience to make an overall more engaging platform? What I loved, again, more about what we saw was there was actually conversations that were going on. It wasn't just providing a snippet of a best practice or a hello. There was a post conversation that was going on. And that's, again, why I believe that I like to use the YouTube component, because that was really the turning point. Was you basically allowed the public to become content video producers, and then you did it on top of a community, and that really just opened up the floodgates for video, but also for user-generated content in the video format, which, as we all know, virtual is the video platform.
Absolutely. And of course, when you use YouTube as that example there, one of the great things about it was that there was no snobbery. There was no looking down on people who were doing content on an iPhone compared to people who were doing it with a really good studio multi-camera setup. As long as the content is out there, it's usable and it's valuable and it's relevant to people. And they will look at some of these communities. And I always look at the music community and musicians, and particularly if there are any guitar players watching. You only have to go on YouTube now, and there are millions and millions of channels of content of people who are reviewing equipment, who are teaching you how to play songs. And some of them have been shot on a phone, stood upright on a book on their desk. Others have been shot with, great audio feeds, but it's the content really that matters. And it's created these online communities through something like YouTube. Let's go to another question, Joe, if we can. Can these tools work in smaller virtual environments, or is it better for bigger events?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that they have an application in both small, medium, and large. Especially, right now, MeetingPlay has been performing hybrid events since, we've been doing on property for 10 years now, but we've been in the hybrid environment since the middle of last year, actually executing. And I believe these tools that we're discussing work just as well in a small environment with your on-property attendees as they do in a large, heavily complicated, very diverse catalog of 300 sessions. Because, one of the things that we're finding right now as we're moving back on property is the virtual users want to know what's going on and what they're missing on property. And these tools really provide that missing link for the on-property experience to the virtual attendees. We've been seeing, roving reporters that are going into exhibit booths and having conversations and putting that back online. And I totally agree with your statement in regards to nobody is looking for broadcast quality, around this environment. And in fact, I think that with how other tools have come online that are less sophisticated, it's made it almost the norm and people overlook it. I remember, when I was younger, I never liked to watch TV with the black bars, right? But then after a year, you would always see the black bars. You look past it. And I almost believe that the lower quality is being viewed as more authentic, right? Because it doesn't have that broadcast feel to it, meaning that it must be real and it's in the moment. We're seeing it used across small, medium, and large. It's used differently, though, across those different dimensions based upon, again, what tool in the arsenal do you need to use to get your goals around content.
Absolutely. And it's interesting, that term broadcast quality. What is broadcast quality? Because 25 years ago, broadcast quality is now of a quality that you can achieve 10 times better just using the mobile phone that's in your pocket. So broadcast quality is a flexible term by its very definition because of how we have evolved and how we can broadcast now. Let's look at another question here, Joe. What was the attendee reaction at the Data Plus AI event with all of these new tools to use?
Yeah. So, first of all, we're still in the middle of combing through all the data. That conference just ended not too long ago. What I could give you is the anecdotal feedback that we got from our partners that we work with, as well as the influencers and some of the actual attendees. And the first initial reaction was, this is different. So now that we're 14 months into this virtual environment, there's some norms that have been put with all of the technology that you use in the virtual environments. So reaction number one was, wait a minute, I get to do something different and I get to actually be a part of producing an overall experience for 60, 70,000 people that are coming to this virtual environment. And I almost equate it to kind of surprise and delight, right? With that became a lot of power that they had, but they used it really respectfully. And then the attendees, looking at the traffic patterns, all of these components, remember, went through the kind of like YouTube. Once you watch a music video, everything that comes back to you is to support that, what we think you might have interest in. So what we're seeing is, because we actually now have year-over-year data, we are seeing an increase in relevant data in terms of click-throughs for those users. And I fully anticipate, as we get through the survey data and then Net Promoter Score, that it's going to support that we provided a more targeted environment to increase more viewership.
I'm just looking at the time, Joe, but we do have a few minutes left, and we're going to try and squeeze in a couple more questions if that's okay with you. How can you encourage and educate attendees in how to interact with this new content?
That's a very good question. And I think that, MeetingPlay is really uniquely positioned in that we work with customers to create an environment that revolves around their goals. So when, as you saw from that example with Databricks, we created a dev hub and a Databricks experience environment. And those were ways that we brought this content that we knew would be relevant to them in different areas. And we wrapped it around, when things would go live, kind of like your main stage right here. So if you build and invest in this, but you put it in the corner where nobody's looking, you're going to fail on producing a really good ROI. What I love most about this example with Databricks was we looked at the attendees and what was going to gravitate towards them and their interest, and then we wrapped this extra functionality around those pieces to increase knowledge that they're even available, right? So that's my biggest suggestion, is to think about the attendee journey and sprinkle these extra components around where you're going to see meaningful traffic.
And finally, one final question before we wrap up, Joe. And some of this you have already touched on, so forgive me, but I think we can expand a little bit more. Interaction with virtual events seems to be very text-based at the moment within virtual event platforms. Will we see more virtual events allowing and encouraging attendees to share their own slides, images, documents, infographics, etc.?
I think that, if not, we're not going to do we're not going to do virtual environments for, the long haul. There's a lot of conversations going around about, hybrid, and things are different, and we're never going back on property and not hybrid. And quite frankly, we don't know, right? As we are moving back on property, this is going to play out. But I will tell you, what we're seeing is if we don't move in the direction that you just identified and what we're talking about, we're not setting ourselves up for success, because technology, not just event technology, has moved and gravitated and has changed the way that people work, how they have fun, and what they do in their personal time forever. And if we don't adapt and move in this direction, I believe that we're putting at risk quite a bit of opportunity to continue the benefits of what we see in a hybrid or virtual environment.
You've been watching the Omni stage at Event Tech Live USA Canada 2021 and how user-generated content changes the virtual event game. Our host for this session has been the CEO and founder at MeetingPlay, Joe Schwinger. Joe, thank you very much for being part of Event Tech Live USA and Canada today. It's been great to have you here. We hope to see you soon.
Take care, everybody.